I never lived in Saddam Hussein's household. That was part of my parents' resistance, actually. Resistance was not, sometimes it's not in big ways. Sometimes it's in small ways. So even when he asked us to, even when he asked my father to be his pilot in 1982, but before that, he actually came into their social life as well. And they tried to apologize from him to, you know, he would invite them and they would make excuses. My father was a commercial pilot, so they often used the excuses that he was traveling, not to make up the, not to come to the invite. In the 80s, when he asked formally my father to be his pilot. And that was I would call it a takeover of the whole household. So we were given a farmhouse in one of his farm compounds. We were required to go to spend every weekend with him, in his farmhouse, not with him. And we would always be dressed up in case he showed up. And there were rules. You have to smile when he smiled. You have to cry when he cried. So you encounter him on a daily basis. Sometimes if he asked us to come in the middle of the weekdays, we would all have to pack up and go. We could not say no to him, but even the kids were enlisted in that relationship. We all had to be at his disposal. I don't want to deny the privileges that came with the relationship. There were privileges, material privileges, cars and helicopters and travels and whatever we wanted. There were all the material privileges. That just didn't protect you when you were close to him. So, and that was amazing thing about him. So you would have dinner, a normal dinner with him, and relaxed dinner, and he would then talk about how he just killed his best friend the night before. And I would like be sitting in the other room and seeing my parents pale, scared to death, that they're all vulnerable. And that's how I think he weaved in fear within us. And in many ways, I thought fear became so much part of my own DNA. I called him Ammo, which is uncle. And that's the proper way to call a father's friend, basically. So there are many times in which he was just Ammo for me. We ate with him, he laughed a lot, he gave me definitely lots of slacks on a lot of times which I violated some rules without knowing that I was violating them. Drinking tea before he drank it, and he's like, oh, let Zainab alone. So my mother was a school mother, I thought, even though she tried to kill herself a lot, but I loved her a lot. And she would always hold me as a teenager, and she would tell me, you should never, ever let any man touch you the wrong way or talk with you the wrong way. And she would actually shake me with a passion, and I'm like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I don't even have a man in my life, you know. And she would tell me, never learn how to cook or clean, because no man should expect that you know how to cook and clean just because you're a woman. And that you have to always be independent, and you have to always stand on your feet, and you should always be strong. So all of these things that my mom told me, and she was adamant that I have to marry for love, which is in a country where there were lots of the marriages are arranged marriages. It was pretty cool. And all of a sudden I was 19, and my mom comes and she's like, you got a marriage proposal from this guy in America, and you need to accept it. And I'm like, what? You know, all your life you told me all of this, and now you want me to accept this? And she's like, you really need to accept it. And she would cry and cry, and my father was there, and we all were like, it doesn't make sense. And she would say, over my dead body, my daughter is to leave. And then we go to Chicago, and we are in the way to the wedding, and my father stops the car and he says, I don't just think this is right. And I don't think it's right. I don't like the man. And my mother cries and says she is not going back to Iraq over my dead body.
Did she explain why?
No,
mother?
No. And there was just crying, and I never wanted to see my mom or my father to cry, actually. Until today, I do whatever they want when they cry. It's true. And so I accepted the marriage, and I went, and I remember actually the marriage ceremony, because in our tradition we get asked 13 times, do you want to, or 12 times, do you want to accept this marriage? And you think about it, do you want to, and I was like, every time I was like, maybe I can say no, maybe I can say no, maybe I can say, until I finally was so scared and I said yes, and all my brothers and my father stormed out of the room crying. So it was like a funeral. And the husband, and then right after that, Iraq invaded Kuwait. And my parents had gone back home, right, within a month. So my parents are back home, Iraq invades Kuwait, and that man ended up doing every single thing my mother told me not to tolerate. every single thing. He physically, verbally abused me, and he was the nightmare. And he expected me to cook and clean and just produce babies, you know. My mother telling me a lot actually about stories of women. So I actually really knew that I wanted to work with women since I was 15 years old. And I remember the moment in which my mom was driving, and she often told me about violence against women and what women go through and all of that. And I turned to her and I said, when I grow up, I want to help women. And she said, yes, you can do it. And I'm so glad, you know, she didn't dismiss it or laughed at me, because since I started Women for Women International, many people laughed at me and they, you know, joked, oh, you know, Mother Teresa, you know, why don't you go and get a job, and all of these things, you know. My mother never did that. My mother was like, yes, you can do it, honey. And I'm so grateful for that. And the second part is I was actually very angry at my mother upon my divorce from my first husband. I didn't see her, first of all, I didn't know whether my parents were alive or dead for many months. So they called me the day before the war. And my mom just gave me her will and said, in case we die, this is what we have. And you should know that. And I didn't see my family for 9 years. So I was very angry at her. How could she do this to me? How could she send me to America on my own with no money, marrying me off to a jerk, you know, and he was, you know, and leave me alone. And it took me my work in Bosnia and Kosovo and Rwanda and Congo and Afghanistan to really understand and to go a full circle. It took me working with war zones. I remember my mother called me when I was in Sarajevo once in the besiege. She found out, I don't know, my ex-husband told her, you know. She said, I get you out of Iraq so you go to Bosnia? You know? But there was something about that, and I had no idea what was going on. I mean, I was so adamant. I would go to rape survivors. I would go to victims like, you must tell the story. You must tell the truth. That's only when we break our silence can we actually break the vicious cycle that women are stuck in. And I think all women are. This is not an Iraqi issue. It's not a Congolese issue. It's not a Bosnian issue. I think all women really are disproportionately impacted by all the worst things that are happening in the world. I do not like Saddam. I never liked Saddam Hussein. And I was against the war. I think he was a dark cloud on all of Iraqis. My family is perhaps the privileged Iraqis, but really a dark cloud. But no change can be sustainable, in my opinion, if it's coming from the outside. That it must be owned by the people. And I'm now speaking as an Iraqi because I feel unless we own our own actions, unless we own our own change, we're going to be stuck in a victimhood stage. Saddam used to oppress us, and now Americans are oppressing us, and we need to take that control of our own country and lead to that change. So him leaving is a good thing, but not through that way. Because the country is destroyed right now. When he was executed, I cried for the country, because I felt through his trial we could have our own truth and reconciliation. Through his trial, I wanted for us to tell the history of what happened to Iraqis, because I believe our history is not written yet. And you still have people, whether they are Sunni or Shia or Kurds or whatever, who want someone to witness the stories of what they've gone through. And his trial could have provided the window of opportunities for us to tell the stories. But they killed him so fast, so short of a trial. So that was one of I felt like this was the last hope that we had for our own process, our own healing process. And the second one is for the rule of law, that we need to apply the best rule of law for the worst criminal of Iraq. And if we can't give him a fair trial and a thorough, transparent trial, then what's the hope for a regular person in Iraq?